Stay tuned to discover how you can start measuring what truly matters.
It's good to see you, Sherry. Thanks for joining the conversation. So I wanted just to get into your work and that we're going to be working together soon on an initiative that I'm really excited about as it pertains to measuring impact for the arts. But if you can just talk a little bit about your background and Sure Impact in your consulting business as well, and how you got into impact measurement for nonprofits, that would be really fascinating.
Absolutely, Angela. I'm excited to be here, and I love talking about impact measurement and management at the nexus of high-performing nonprofits, which is why I enjoy partnering with you and all of the great work you're doing with arts organizations and helping them tell a different story related to public value. No one grows up and says, do you know what I think I want to do with my life is to become an impact measurement expert? At least that's not necessarily what I thought of when I was, graduating from high school. But what I absolutely always have been fascinated about is using data to predict performance. Even as a high school senior, I was doing studies on the drug problem in my high school, and doing some research related to different attitudes and opinions about drug use. And so in hindsight, I'm like, oh, okay, yes, this was a natural, just who I was meant to be. But I went to graduate school I studied psychology, then went to graduate school to study industrial and organizational psychology, which is really looking at prediction of high performance. How do we predict if a business is going to be successful, if an organization initiative is going to be successful? And luckily for me, my first job out of graduate school was helping people with severe and persistent mental illness find work, and using the tools that I had learned as, person organization fit and what would make someone successful in their career. I was creating a platform called the Job Profile Questionnaire. And I learned that I could use my love for passion and data and technology for the social good. So that launched me into a 10-year career in government, where I was a government funder looking at how do we measure the impact of our grant making. And I worked at juvenile courts, and I worked at the state of Ohio in the Department of Aging. So really saw from a social services perspective, looking at how to measure all things from, babies to seniors and every program in between. So very much developed a very good resume related to how do we measure the impact of social services. And after helping use data to save the state $250 million in Medicaid during the Great Recession, I felt a call to help as many nonprofits as possible use data to tell their story. So I left state government to form my first company, Measurement Resources. And we are an organizational development and research firm that works with government, nonprofit, social enterprises all over the U.S. And we help them define what should they measure, how to measure it, and then how to use that data to better raise more money, increase the effectiveness of their programming. And that's when the arts came in, because I had some colleagues in my world that were associated with the arts organizations. And so they were fascinated about what I was doing and said, hey, can this work in the arts too? I'm like, yeah, it can work in the arts too. And so in Measurement Resources, we work with the arts organizations as well as social services, helping them measure their impact. And we can take that in a minute. How I got to now Sure Impact, being the CEO of Sure Impact, is after working with hundreds of nonprofit leaders, helping them develop these impact measurement frameworks, coming to us and saying, Sherry, we absolutely love the insights that your firm's providing, but what technology should we be using to have this at our fingertips to make it easier, make it more automated for us? And after extensive market research, we decided the product we wanted to recommend didn't exist. So we built it ourselves. We launched the company in 2018. So Sure Impact is a online cloud-based platform that helps nonprofits track what they do, how well they do it, and how people are better off. So they have these impact analytics at their fingertips, again, helping them to raise more money and drive true social change.
So there's so much there that's exciting. My mind goes to a couple of questions. One, why hasn't this been done before? Really, when you and I first talked, you had mentioned that assessment tests were something that you were intrigued on how those tests could predict success or outcomes, right?
Yes.
So what was it about? And it sounds then that you then spent the next over a decade kind of drilling into that.
Yeah.
What was it about that fascinated you, and how did you save the state $250 million?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think it really does stem from my own personal journey. As a child, I had dyslexia. And so during my early childhood, elementary age years, I was subjected to a lot of learning assessments. So I had to take a lot of extra tests and assessments that my peers didn't have to take. And to try to understand what was back then, what was wrong with my brain. I think I didn't identify with the labels that were put on me, or at least I didn't understand back then what having a learning disability really meant. And so I think that's what really inspired me to understand what can we predict, and what are we predicting? So I think that's why I went into studying this, and why I was always very curious about it, because I didn't feel like I didn't identify with the labels. And so that just evolved into a very natural curiosity related to how do we correctly predict performance, whether it's in individuals, whether it's in systems, whether it's in, groups. But I also believe in the power I do believe that we can predict performance or use data and insights to help us predict performance. So I'll kind of then transition to your question related to how did I save the state $250 million in Medicaid? Well, the director at the time, Director Barbara Riley, she also was a huge believer in the power of data and prediction of performance. And so she hired me to run their performance center. And so I developed this thing called the long-term care savings calculator, which really set up our agency to have outcomes data. So yes, we knew how many people were being served in our programs. We were looking at how much it costs to keep people in their own homes if they were sick enough and qualified for Medicaid and nursing home care, but running interventions and programs that made these seniors not have to move into long-term care facilities, but giving them the care they need. So we had were we keeping people successfully in their own homes? Were they accessing less services because they were healthy? And that's really how we were showing how when we invested in these programs, we were keeping people healthier and we were saving significant dollars in Medicaid by people not having to transition to nursing homes.
So how do we assess now in that very broad terms when we look at impact or outcomes? What data does the majority collect now to show the impact?
Yeah, so I did study that as well when I was making the transition from state government to measurement resources. I did an unfunded market research study that eventually became the basis of my book called Impact and Excellence. And what I looked at was variety of nonprofits, arts organizations included across the country. What data did they have, and how are they using that data? And what we found was only 25% in government, so 25% of government and nonprofits had data aligned with their mission, which I would consider outcomes and impact, and were using it strategically to make decisions. The majority have only what I call outputs data. So, how many people did we serve? What did we do with those people? And how much money did we raise or spend? Like that's where most of the sector is. And I'm on a professional and personal mission to switch the sector to actually understanding how are people better off and measuring that and using the relationship between what you do and how well you do it to predict how can we make people better off so we have better, happy, healthy, thriving communities.
So that's where we intersect, because I've been on a personal and professional mission for over a decade in advocating for the arts, but I would say, at least in the last 5 years, we talk about the arts impact. And a lot of times, or I should say for probably 25 years, if not more, we've focused on the economic impact. And what I've noticed, especially through the pandemic, and now that we've come out of the pandemic, I get a sense, and I'm nervous about the sector sliding back to how we measured impact, or the same talking points or terminology that we always use, which is, again, focusing on the economic impact. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm saying, if the story you're telling isn't getting you results, it's time to tell a new story.
Yeah.
And so when I go and talk about the arts are foundational to innovation, because at the forefront we're creatives, and you're not innovative if you're not creative, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
There's no tangible numbers, right, that we could say, but I work with clients who tell me that, oh, we've got 100% graduation rate within participants of our program. And I said, great, show me. Well, we just know it because in talking, but we're not capturing that. How can we make this change? So to get back to our intersections, our interests intersect, is because I want to redefine the arts.
Yeah.
My podcast, Arts Redefined, and I want to redefine it based on, we are not frivolous, but we are foundational because of impact, because of how we contribute to the public value. So why hasn't this been done before? And we talk about it, but yet we just seem to keep talking in circles. And the next thing we know, funding cycles come and go, right? And so
I think that, well, I mean, there's several reasons, and especially with the arts, I'll focus on that sector more specifically, because I hear this from funders all the time, where they're like, well, we really can't measure the impact of the arts in those other tangible ways, which I can say, absolutely you can, because social sector programs are doing it all the time. And in my opinion, arts do have a social sector impact. So if they can think more like a social sector provider, then the measurement will make sense, and we'll talk about that. But I think first off, the one who has the gold makes the rules. So the funders haven't required it of the arts. The funders have said you don't need to measure that, or economic impact is okay. And therefore, arts organizations have not prioritized it. The boards haven't prioritized it. They don't have a line item in their budget for impact measurement. And so that's a lot of why haven't we done it yet, is no one has made them.
Well, and I would argue that's because I would say the majority thinks it's what you said to begin with, is you can't measure that. So when I approached you and said, we want to measure empathy, we want to measure kindness, measure creativity, and you said, yes, we can do that. That to me is a game changer, and hope that we can revolutionize the way that we invest in the arts.
Yeah.
How do you measure kindness, Sherry?
So a couple ways. So the first thing that I would recommend any arts organization do is go through what we call the collaborative that we'll be working with will do this. They'll go through what we call the 5 whys exercise, where they're asked, why do people participate in the arts experience? Or, why does your arts organization do what it does? And get them to think beyond just, we create, great theatrical performances or music performances or visual arts, whatever medium they're using, but think about, how are you improving definitely creativity, 100%. How are we helping people be more understanding of people that are different from them? That's kind of getting at the core. What are those constructs that even I believe the arts is it's a mental health vehicle, a wellness vehicle that is so critical where we are today. But understanding what are those fundamental whys, those constructs first. And then that's where kind of, my decades of experience building assessments or knowing what validates those constructs. Psychologists have been spending decades creating standardized measures to measure these types of constructs through surveys or assessments. So that's how we do it, is through surveys. But they've been researched and validated, and it's a whole field that a lot of people don't even know exists.
Yeah, and I say it's about the process, not the performance. We focus too much on the performance aspect, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But I view the performance as a community celebration, if you will, of all of the work that's gone on in the process. And that's where the real impact, that's where the change happens.
Yeah.
Where you're building empathy and you're building communication skills and collaboration and all of that. Okay, again, I always think about, if we're talking about this, why hasn't it been done?
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that might be out there to adopt this way of measuring impact?
Yeah. Well, I think that the challenges are, it is a culture change because we are requiring a data collection. So that's something that may be new or unfamiliar to an arts organization. So we hear a lot of times the kind of the barriers or the reasons why is we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough staff, we don't have enough expertise, and we don't have enough trained staff. So essentially, the two companies that I created, Measurement Resources, started with, well, we can be your expertise, we can be your trained staff, we can walk alongside you and do this with you or for you. And then we realized that, well, without the right technology, it is kind of cumbersome. It does take a lot of time. And if humans are doing it, it's going to take, it's going to be expensive because people, dollars time. So let's find a way to make it easier and automate it by leveraging technology. So that's where Share Impact came in. But even now that there's a more affordable way, a more automated way that is not as people intensive, we learned that no one had budget. So if you think about where do you prioritize your spending, well, I'm going to prioritize it towards the actual delivery of service, not technology that supports our ability to communicate our public value. And so it's a culture change. And do you want to be able to better measure and communicate your public value so that you can attract more funds from different audiences, or don't you?
Right. And it's almost like not putting a pause, adjusting, shifting, because again, these funding cycles continue to go. I just read an article not too long ago about California. They're looking at cutting all state budgets, but the arts council's budget in California, they're looking at cutting it by 38%, which would put California around the funding levels of Kentucky.
Wow.
And that's California. And so for me, we're not going to see a shift, and it is all cyclical. But in my work in advocating, lobbying for funding for the arts, it's only getting harder. And we've been hearing that for years, decades. It's not just public funding, but it's also philanthropy and foundations. And now that shift to social and human services funding, which you and I've talked about, and you even mentioned here, I think so much of what the arts does is that human and social service. We do need to shift that mindset, or I'm afraid that we'll continue to see a squeeze on investments for arts nonprofits. That's why it's important for me. I feel like that the sand glass, or the sand is running through the hourglass of in that I want to get what we've talked about doing up and running sooner than later, so we can actually show that impact measurement that's out there. Do you see similar constraints within the human service nonprofits as far as investments are shrinking there as well? Yes.
Well, I see there's a transfer of wealth, a generational transfer of wealth right now. And so that fundamental shift, what we're seeing is that whereas maybe the last generation of wealth gave to legacy organizations that were aligned with their personal passions or missions, this next generation isn't necessarily going to just keep funding what their parents did or fund in the same way that they did. They want to be what we call engines of impact. And so even I think this is true for arts or humanist social services. They want to invest their dollars in a way that they can see how it is really making a meaningful difference in the communities and the causes they care about. And so I think, yes, there's a pressure for all nonprofits, regardless of their mission, to start to really think about how do they use this data to demonstrate how they're engines of impact.
So if I wanted to change my mindset as an arts organization and start, what are we talking as far as how long have you typically seen time frame needed to really start to see some of the impact data coming in? That you're getting that sense of, oh, okay, this is something tangible that we can wrap our arms around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes as long as your intervention takes, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Is so if you start to implement it with your first performance or first gallery, show or whatever that offering is, or if you have an arts class or arts program, that first, 6-week class or whatever it is, and you commit to, okay, we're going to track, these are our outcomes, here's the assessment we use, we're going to administer it, you'll start to get that data in. And if you analyze it correctly, and with Sure Impact, it analyzes it for you, so you don't have to worry about how to analyze data to tell a story, you'll start to see some trends. And then the more you do it, the more you'll see trends over time. And it's really amazing if you can track longitudinally people that you've impacted over time. Because especially with arts organizations, you do have the opportunity to engage an audience for decades if you wanted to. And so you could really see how you were transforming communities by engaging with the residents. And that's what I love about arts too, is that it's for everyone. Well, it should be for everyone in the communities. And it's not like, it's the positive, it's uplifting, right? Where so many social services, you're only engaging in those programs when there's something wrong. Whereas the arts, you engage with them all the time. Well,
right. Yeah. So is this the type of database, if I'm in fundraising or advancement, is this a similar kind of information collecting, recording, that it's like a CRM where I'm sitting in and I have my lists of clients or participants and I'm just inputting data as they participate?
So you're inputting data about who they are, where they live, what they're engaged, what offerings are they engaged in, and then you have all that data plus then the outcomes. How are they, based on these standardized assessments, how are they responding? How are they reporting changes over time in these critical outcome areas for your nonprofit? So we developed a creativity scale that looked at really how one was improving in constructs aligned with 21st century learning and creativity goals, which employers loved to see because they want, in this current market, we need employees who can be more creative and innovative because of the way the world is changing so fast. So it's like being able to go to employers there. That's a great way to like partner with employers. They might pay for a performance at their organization. Like, it's just reimagining how we communicate with potential sponsors or donors and the value we have for the work.
So it gets out of what I consider called transactional impact or transactional measurement, which is how big are your audiences, what's your budget, and how many people do you serve in your program?
Yeah.
It's now getting into, you're still tracking that, but where some organizations survey audiences more rudimentary or, that kind of information can be plugged in to show the lasting impact of visiting a museum or going to a play.
Yes. Yeah. And it's changing the why, like yes, because, typically arts organizations, they might do a survey after a performance, but they're looking at, visiting a museum. They're asking questions like, were the restrooms clean? Did you, enjoy yourself? And you can ask those questions too, because those are important quality questions, but it's going beyond that and asking, did this change your mind about something you hadn't thought about before? Really getting at, like, I know one of the things we talked about measuring in this pilot project we'll be doing together is empathy. Like, can we increase one's empathetic skills through the arts?
Yeah, that's where it gets me so excited about this venture, because to not only be able to give a tool to individual arts organizations, the ability to track in real time their data. Also, something that I know that has been frustrating is when we've done economic impact studies, it's like we launch that and then you often don't get the results for 12 to 24 months. And so you're waiting. but this is something where you can log in at a moment, whether you're the executive director or the advancement, that you can gather that immediately. But then the collective, for me, it's the collective. And that's what I'm excited about, is how we can show collectively as a sector, as an industry, the overall public value that arts has, which can be and is transformational.
Yes, and that's also, we didn't talk much about that, is the way we've built the platform, it seamlessly will share data to a community. So you'll have a collective impact of the arts organizations, like all of the arts organizations, if they were all using it as a collective impact project, which will then showcase that it's not just this theater or just, because people have different preferences in what they want to engage in, but regardless of the genre, the impact is there.
Right. Which again I think will be a game changer. I appreciate your time. I'm excited on this project that we will kick off shortly, and hopefully we'll come back and start talking about some of the results that we're seeing within nonprofit arts on measuring public value.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, Angela.
Thanks, Sherry. I appreciate it.